Welcome, warrior. We are going to be reading Doctrine and Covenants section 118, 119, and 120. Here is the historical background. Also, loving these baby hairs, or the hairs that I pull out of my head that are now growing back. I think I look like a who. I have to watch the Grinch. Okay. This revelation is a part of the series of revelations Joseph received on July 8th, 1838. Now that the main body of the church was in far west Missouri and some leadership had apostatized, there was a need for the reorganization of church leadership. At this time, the law of succession had not yet been established, and the leaders needed direction from the Lord regarding the reorganization of the Quorum of the 12. As church leaders, including Thomas B. Marsh, still acting as president of the Quorum of the 12, united in prayer, this revelation was received. Who was no longer one of the 12 apostles, you ask? Here we go. Luke S. Johnson, John F. Boynton, William E. McClellan, Lyman E. Johnson. They had all left the church. This left 4 positions open in the Quorum of the 12. That's crazy. Right now, we currently have 1 position open in the Quorum of the 12. And we just recently got the President Oaks just recently announced his counselors. And so that was cool that we get to sustain them. And so we have President Oaks as the president and prophet of the church. Then we have President Henry B. Eyring, his first counselor, and then President D. Todd Christofferson. And I'm like, this is so cool. It's going to be awesome. Okay, so with so much turmoil, it would be easy to imagine how the enemies of the church would have hoped for the church's collapse. However, the Lord had prepared others to fill these positions, and 2 of them will be future presidents of the church. Don't mess with the Lord. Okay, so called to fill the Quorum of the 12 were Willard Richards. It's like a billiard. Willard Richards, John Taylor, Wilford Woodruff, and John E. Page. So, and then in Doctrine and Covenants 119, the historical background, it says, how were the members to fulfill the command of the Lord to build the temple and send missionaries on missions, and the Lord had told them not to go into further debt. So furthermore, the saints in 1833, furthermore, in 1838, the saints and the entire country were still in the midst of an economic depression, and many of the saints had already given up their goods and property as they left their homes in Ohio and Missouri, yet somehow the work was to continue. But how? So following the admonition of Malachi 3:10, leaders began requesting a tithing of the people to help pay for the establishment of Zion. As Joseph had a keen awareness of the mandates of God, he prayed, O Lord, show unto thy servants how much thou requires of the properties of thy people for a tithing. Section 119 contains the revelation that came to Joseph as the Lord's answer. As you study this section, consider the circumstances of these saints at the time. This was not a time of ease and prosperity. It was a time of sacrifice and uncertainty. But to the Lord, tithing is not a financial matter. He knows that he can open the windows of heaven upon his saints, and he will. Beautiful Nauvoo, something that was not even on their minds, was less than 1 year away. And then for the historical background on 120, it says, who then was to distribute these tithes was the question being asked by Joseph and the other church leaders in this revelation given on the same day as Doctrine and Covenants section 119. The Lord gives the answer. Okay, so we're reading section 118, 119, and 120. So 118 says, revelation given through Joseph Smith the prophet at far west Missouri, July 8th, 1838, in response to supplication, show us thy will, O Lord, concerning the 12. Okay, and then we have section 119, which is revelation given through Joseph Smith the prophet at far west Missouri, July 8th, 1838, in answer to his supplications, O Lord, show unto thy servants how much thou requests of the property of thy people for a tithing. The law of tithing, as understood today, had not been given to the church previous to this revelation. The term tithing in the prayer just quoted and in previous revelations had meant not just 1/10, but all free will offerings or contributions to the church funds. The Lord had previously given to the church the law of consecration and stewardship of property, which members, chiefly the leading elders, entered into by covenant that was to be everlasting. Because of failure on the part of many to abide by this covenant, the Lord withdrew it for a time and gave instead the law of tithing to the whole church. I thought tithing was like a thing that we did from the Bible, but clearly I'm confused. The prophet asked the Lord how much of their property he required for sacred purposes. The answer was this revelation. Okay, I love it. And then in section 120, revelation given through Joseph Smith the prophet, Far West, Missouri, July 8th, 1838, making known the disposition of the properties tithed as named in the preceding revelation. Okay, so I wanted to read all of those prefaces so that we could just be into the reading. Okay, so it says, verily, thus saith the Lord, let a conference be held immediately, let the 12 be organized, and let men be appointed to supply the place of those who are fallen. I love that. I love that that's the term he used, because sometimes we fall and sometimes we fail, instead of like the wicked, or, you know what I mean? But it's more of like a military term, like the fallen, right? So let my servant Thomas remain for a season in the land of Zion to publish my word. Let the residue continue to preach from that hour. And if they will do this in all lowliness of heart, in meekness and humility and long suffering, I, the Lord, give unto them a promise that I will provide for their families, and an effectual door shall be opened for them from henceforth. And the next spring, let them depart to go over the great waters, and there promulgate my gospel, the fullness thereof, and bear record of my name. Let them take leave of my saints in the city of Far West on the 26th day of April next, on the building spot of my house, saith the Lord. Let my servant John Taylor, and also my servant John E. Page, and also my servant Wilford Woodruff, and also my servant Willard Richards be appointed to fill the places of those who have fallen, and be officially notified of their appointment. Okay, so there's a quote here. It says, I received a letter from Thomas B. Marsh informing me of my appointment to fill the place in the quorum of the 12, one who had fallen, and I was requested to come to Far West as soon as possible to prepare for a mission to England in the spring. End quote. President Woodruff, Journal, August 9th, 1838. Okay, so this revelation was given in July 8th. Okay, but it seems like Wilford Woodruff got it August 9th. Okay, so sometimes things take a minute, So all 4 of these men accepted the call and were ordained members of the quorum of the 12. Notice the promise that the Lord gave these newly called apostles and those already called. If they do this in all lowliness of heart, in meekness and humility and long suffering, then the Lord would provide for their families, and an effectual door shall be opened for them from henceforth. That promise will mean a lot more in April of 1839. Okay. Then we have Doctrine and Covenants, section 119. Okay, it says, verily thus saith the Lord, I require all their surplus property to be put into the hands of the bishop of my church in Zion, for the building of mine house, and for the laying of the foundation of Zion, and for the priesthood, and for the debts of the presidency of my church. And this shall be the beginning of the tithing of my people. And after that, those who have thus been tithed shall pay 1/10 of their interest annually, and this shall be a standing law unto them forever. For my holy priesthood, saith the Lord. Verily I say unto you, it shall come to pass that all those who gather unto the land of Zion shall be tithed of their surplus properties, and shall observe this law, and they shall not be found worthy to abide among you. And I say unto you, if my people observe not this law, to keep it holy, and by this law sanctify the land of Zion unto me, that my statutes and my judgments may be kept thereon, that it may be most holy. Behold, verily I say unto you, it shall not be a land of Zion unto you, and this shall be an ensample unto all the stakes of Zion, even so, amen. Okay. So, So this is the law of tithing. This is the beginning of the tithing of my people. The Lord explained and made clear that the saints were to be tithed 1/10, as well as donate any surplus property, anything they don't really need, to the church. Of this, President Joseph Fielding Smith taught. Also, I love that because it's like right now, what do? We pay our tithing, we pay fast offering, and then whatever we don't need, I go and take it to DI, which is also owned by the church. And so I think that's so cool. Joseph Fielding Smith, he says, in more recent times, the church has not called upon the members to give all their surplus property to the church, but it has been the requirement according to the covenant that they pay the 10th, end quote. And then another quote from President Howard W. Hunter, he says, the law is simply stated as 1/10 of all their interest. Interest means profit, compensation, increase. It is the wage of one employed, the profit from the operation of a business, the increase of one who grows or produces, or the income to a person from any other source. The Lord said it is a sustaining law forever, as it has been in the past. End quote. President Howard W. Hunter, April 1964 conference report. And then the last quote for this is from Elder Earl C. Tingey. He says, I was recently in Independence, Missouri, and felt a need to drive an hour north to Far West. As I stood in Far West and visualized what it once was, I opened my scriptures and read section 119 of the Doctrine and Covenants. This revelation was given through the prophet Joseph Smith at Far West on July 8, 1838. In the midst of these persecutions, I thought to myself, and then he quoted this, I thought to myself that the law of tithing could not have been received by the members of the church at a less opportune time than then, but they received it, and the members commenced living this new law at the time when they were losing their possessions, and in some cases their lives. As I visited Far West, I gained a spiritual testimony of the law of tithing that was stronger and deeper than I had ever before felt, end quote. I think that's so sweet. Elder Earl C. Tingey, The Law of Tithing, April 2002, General Conference. I think that as church members, we grow up and we pay tithing and we're so used to it that we don't necessarily have time or set aside something to reflect on how tithing has affected our lives. And I heard once in a quote of some sort, it said that if it doesn't feel like a sacrifice, then something like it needs to feel like a sacrifice that you're making, right? And, sometimes tithing feels like, yes, we're fine, and sometimes tithing feels like, oh, I don't know if we can pay tithing. Like right now, our van literally broke down on the freeway, and we took it in and they've been looking at it. Anyway, after paying a couple $1,000s already just to diagnose it, they tell us that it's a timing belt issue. And then they opened up the engine and was like, guess what? You have to replace the entire engine. And we're like, what? Anyway, it's like $25,000 to do that. $25,000. Like, who has that money? And I was just like, holy, we're going to buy a brand. And like, our van is a 12-passenger Nissan NB. And so like, you can't just buy another one for less than that anyway, or for that amount. And so we're like it's pretty much like that's all the only option we even have is to just pay for the new engine. And I was like, holy smokes. And we have some friends that were going to try to do it, but I guess we can't find like a engine that they can put in it. The only one they can find is like 140,000. I'm like, okay, well, that thing's just going to break down before we have any other options to like, before we can actually get to use it. Right. So I'm like, that is so sad. Anyway. And so like, so tithing is going to be very hard for us to pay, because we have those huge expenses. And I don't know, maybe it's the Lord trying to humble us and be like, hey, we're going to have you pay tithe. We're going to see if you pay tithing this month or something, and it's going to be one of those sacrifices. But I am grateful for the opportunity to to stay humble and be like, yeah, I know that paying tithing is a sacrifice, and to be more aware of the blessings so that it can help us, so it can sustain us through, the hardships of life. And so anyway, like, I'm so sad that it has to be, because there's so much that you can do with that, and so much that our family needs, that we could use that. We could start a business, you could invest it, you can do so many things, and instead we're just going to put it into our van. Anyway, and then there's a note from President Hinckley. He says, the law of consecration was not removed when the law of tithing was introduced. Or no, sorry, it's just a note. This is what President Hinckley says. He says, President Hinckley has adamantly declared that the law of consecration is still in effect. And that's Teachings of Gordon V. Hinckley, page 639. Law of consecration. Okay, now we're on Doctrine and Covenants, section 120. And this is just one verse. It says, verily thus saith the Lord, the time is now come that it shall be disposed of by a council composed of the first presidency of my church and the bishop of his council, and by my high council, and by mine own voice unto them, saith the Lord, even so, amen. I didn't understand not a single word of that. Sometimes that happens, right? As the church has continued to grow, President J. Reuben Clark gave this explanation to how the church funds are distributed, and shows how carefully tithes are handled. Okay, so I love these explanations, right? Because it helps me know how my tithing is being used, so that when I am feeling the sacrifice, that I will look to the blessings that come, not just to all the things I'm sacrificing, So anyway, here's the quote. It says, tithing is not the property of the president. He does not claim it or collect it. Tithing is received by the local bishops in the respective wards, who are under the supervision of the local presidents of the stakes. The whole income is accounted for to the presiding bishopric of the church, and is under their direction. Their office contains complete records of all the tithing paid during each year. Every tithe payer will find in that office has his record. The entire receipts and disbursements are there accounted for in the most complete detail. Under the direction of the first presidency, a budget is drawn up as nearly as may be at the first of the year, which includes all of the proposed expenditures of the tithing. This budget is the result of the careful consideration of the departments which are responsible for the expenditure of the funds. This budget is then taken before the Council of the Expenditure of the Tithing, composed, as the Revelation provides, the First Presidency, the Council of the 12, and presiding bishopric. This council considers and discusses the budget so submitted, approving or disapproving, as the case may be, individual items, but finally passing the budget. The approved budget, as it comes from that meeting, is then turned over for its expenditures to a committee on expenditures. This committee then passes upon and authorizes the expenditures of the tithing, so that there is a complete check upon all of the tithing which is paid into the church. End quote. Okay, so it wasn't like how the church uses the funds, but it was how the church is able to account for everything and budget it, and then it gets approved or not approved by so many different people. Okay, this is President J. Reuben Clark, October 1943 conference report. Okay, so something to think about is, what did you learn from these sections? And then how has observing the law of tithing been a blessing to you? Okay, so now we can think about that, and I'm going to read and live it and then we will be all done. Okay, so to anyone who has to leave home and family in order to move forward the cause of Christ, he gives this promise: I will provide for their families, and an effectual door shall be opened for them. From henceforth, he has you and them in his hands. Don't worry. Oh, this is such a good thing for like missionary moms, missionary dads. Okay, then the next one, 119. Says the law of tithing allows each of us in the kingdom to be part of building the kingdom. It makes every program, structure, and effort of the church sacred because of sacrifice. be a part of the building. Loving that. And then, I guess that was it. All right. So this is a nice time to reflect on our tithing, our sacrifice of tithing, and to pay tithing if we have not yet, or if we're behind, because this is almost the end of the year, and I gotta make sure that we are all paid up. Okay, until section 121, stay strong, warrior. Wait, and you might be asking, why do I feel like I need to be all paid up? And it's because I want to approach the throne of God with confidence. And when I do those things like keeping commandments, I'm able to have that confidence as I approach Heavenly Father and Jesus Christ with all the pleadings of my heart and all the desires, and at least I can say that there are some things I am good at in being faithful with. So anyways, there you go.